Okay. We decided to commit to the whole intro thing. So we're just doing it. So here's our intro for this episode. We are talking about ageism. I do think it's important to say, though, and I was thinking about this after we recorded, like the conversation we're about to have. Well, we already had it, but listening back to it, I know that this is definitely not everyone's experience with ageism. And like the stuff we talk about, I think is just with our guest, it's just like very much our opinions and our own personal experiences. So if you're listening to this being like, that didn't happen to me, or like, I don't feel that way, I didn't think that way, my parents don't feel that way, like totally valid.
We'd
Because
love to hear
everyone's,
how your parents do feel.
yeah, like everyone's experience with aging and ageism is different. And we know ageism can be, it can happen to young people and older people and people in between. People of all ages can experience it. So, yeah, I guess just hold that, if you will, while you listen to this episode.
I do think at least the people who I'm assuming is our audience, I think it will help you all to feel perhaps a little differently about your parents and your parents' experience. And I think that's cool because we came here wanting to be inclusive and open up conversation and be able to have moments where we agree and disagree and maybe don't come to anything conclusive. But even in that act, I feel like up until this point, we still have kept it pretty, in our age group, in our circle, in our thing. So it was cool moving outside of our usual bubble. And I hope we continue to move outside of our bubbles in these conversations and push the limits of comfort and find ourselves in some uncomfortable places. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's it. I hope
That's it. We
you,
hope you like the show.
yeah, enjoy this week's episode. Vibes revealed. Welcome to Vibes Revealed,
A podcast dedicated to pulling back the veil around wellness with your hosts,
Taylor McKiska.
and Jay Tollett.
We believe living well is for everyone.
And no topic is taboo. Join us on our journey as we redefine what it means to be truly well in a modern world,
We're celebrating everyday magic.
but always keeping it real.
Let's vibe. Amazing. We're here. It's Vibes Revealed, episode 11. Is this episode 11?
Yep.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we have a guest today that we will introduce in a bit, but I'll tell you right now, we're keeping it in the family again, kind of. We're interviewing my boyfriend's mom. Her name's Kathy. I'm excited. So off the bat, we're going to talk a little bit about ageism today. We'll get into it later. But before we do, just to kind of like, get in it, I wanted to ask you both, how's communication been for you this week? Do you want to go
Do
first?
I go first?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been, I have to say, not great. The last couple of weeks, communication's been not great for me. And I've really just opted out. I think besides you, and I saw a friend, I saw friends last weekend, but like I haven't really elected to speak to anyone unless it was, absolutely necessary, AKA we were in the same room as each other. I haven't really been offering myself up for communication just because I feel like I'm in a really contemplative space and it might be read as like depression, but I'm just reading it as thinking a lot about a lot of things. So I've just kept my mouth shut because that's what feels right for the time. But who knows what it will be? Maybe it's Mercury retrograde. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I feel that. Like I was saying, I had a meeting with one of my like coaches earlier this week and was telling her that I feel like every time I open my mouth, it's just like absolute idiot, dumb nonsense. Like I'm not saying anything of substance and I actually don't know what I'm saying at all. Aside from
Relate.
that, I get what you mean about just like opting out. Like I feel like I think because I feel so idiot dumb that like I just don't want to say anything. I'm like,
Right.
I don't have anything to add to this. Same, like anything I say is just going to sound really bleak. And I don't want to put that out there, you know?
Right.
Which I also think is just kind of like, that sucks too, because I want people to feel like they can put anything out there, but at the same time, like not put it on me. You know what I mean? I did have a situation where it was like just kind of forced into conversation that I was like, just because you want to have this doesn't mean I want to have this. And just because it makes you feel better to talk it out doesn't mean it made me feel better to talk it out. And I feel exactly the same as I did before, except just now even more frustrated. So
Oh my
that's,
God, I can relate.
yeah, that's kind of how communication has been for me. And yeah, I honestly, I feel like except for you and our podcast recording, I'm giving everyone like 10% of myself at any
Right.
time. Like it's just like this is the most I am conversationally, and then everyone else is like, it's a little.
Right.
So
Right.
lucky you, podcast listeners. You're really getting the best of me.
Absolutely.
What about you?
I was trying to think. I mean, I don't feel I've had like a lot of deep conversations with anybody this week, but I'm in a writing class and I was supposed to like critique two people's stories, and I felt like my brain was just blank, and I was like, what meaningful comments do I have to say about this story? And I feel like it's just such a huge thing for them. Like, I don't want to say something that's going to hurt them or dash their, their creative juices. And so it's just like, I just finished like a half an hour ago. And my class is at noon. And I finally, just like, you have to do this. But hopefully I did them justice.
Yeah. That
Otherwise,
sense of being like,
I haven't really talked. I haven't talked to you guys. So I find out I'm getting 10%. So I can't imagine what 90% would be like.
no.
Yeah, it's
I just can relate to that feeling of like, I'm having this conversation because I have to have it. Like these papers have to get critiqued. But that's that's the extent of the effort here. I mean, yeah, that might be the vibe.
Yeah, I think the thing too is that like I'm exhausted by things being deeper than they are. And like I'm really having the realization of like I'm really not, there is no like hidden motive. There's nothing deeper than what I'm telling somebody. And like I don't really have anywhere deeper to go. Like I feel very much like a 13-year-old boy where you're just like, what's up? And they're like, nothing. And they actually mean nothing because there's not a single other thing going on in their head. Like, that's it. That's where I am. It's just
Totally.
like, I have nothing to offer you. Yeah. So that's fun.
All right. I mean, so if anyone else is feeling that way, you're not alone. Could be in the stars, could be in the seasons. It's something.
Yeah. Also, would love to know how everyone else is feeling. If you have had big communication breakthroughs or great communication things, or if you just feel like all of your communication is just not hitting, let us know.
Oh my gosh, I had a conversation with one of my mentors, my dream teacher, and she was just talking about like, she's like, what if some of the like super senses that you have in your dreams, like whether it be telepathy or flying, what if they're just reflective of like senses that you actually have in real life? And how can you tap into those senses in real life? And she was talking about, she's like, I'm not going to go too far into this, but like, what if this isn't the Matrix? What if one day we all just collectively chose to believe that we could put our hands through tables? Then, like, would we be able to put our hands through tables? And then that conversation popped into my mind just now. And I was like, what if we all just collectively decided to believe that Mercury retrograde brought great conversation? What if we just honored Mercury retrograde for once instead of like plastering it over every fucking like tabloid and gossip site and all these things being like fear, fear, fear? Because I feel like it gets to me and I'm like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. But I'm like, is it really that bad? Let's have a collective belief that like it's not that bad.
Yeah.
We're fine.
That's what I was saying. I usually honestly have pretty good Mercury retrograde. Like my shadow periods are the roughest times of the whole thing, like usually right before and right after. But while I'm in it, I feel very okay to just be slow about stuff. I don't feel any pressure to make shit happen or to like get to a conclusion. Like I feel really fine to just be like, this is what it is. And this is, I'm not going to push it. On the note of dreams, best dream I've had in months. I had a dream that I was like at a club with some people from Love Island. And it was like, I'm not going to tell the whole dream, but it was just like mostly very nice. And I
I
was just
love
in
that.
this club where, there was like bottle service, which I haven't been to a club in like since I was 22 probably. And like, there was just like lights and lasers and bottle service. And then also like, it kind of felt like it was a weird mall, but I was just there like hugging everyone from Love Island and like, they were my friends and like, we all just like knew each other because I had been on the show. And so I have no idea what that says about my abilities because
we could
it
dive
really
into this.
probably, but yeah, it was pretty nice. Overall I enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm excited to explore this dream more
Yeah,
at a later hour.
yeah, for sure. Should we do our card of the convo?
I think we should.
Cool. I'm excited for this. I actually have been pulling more tarot than I was. Like basically every day that I've been here, I've been able to sit outside for a little bit and pull a card.
I love that. Kathy, what's your relationship with tarot?
Like I used Meg, her teacher, and she trained us in tarot this year. So we did classes like at the beginning before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. And we did it on Zoom. And then I spent like hours and hours a day working on it. So I feel like I finally know the whole deck and all the reversals and how to read. And so I've been like reading for people, but I haven't started actually charging yet. But I've actually
Amazing.
discovered that I'm pretty good at it. Like it opens up my intuition, and I've had some pretty crazy things happen during them. And my friends that are now saying that everything I tell them happens. So I want to keep going with it. So I love it.
Amazing. So I'm excited for your input when we pull this card.
Yeah. So this is going to be something we can refer back to throughout the conversation, something to kind of set the tone. Let's see what comes up. Okay. I'm using my Halloween deck. So it's 6 of pumpkins, which is pentacles reversed.
Okay.
Usually when I am dealing with 6 of pentacles reversed, I feel like there is sort of a like messy outpouring of things. I usually get it as the reminder to give more intentionally.
Okay.
6 of Pentacles usually to me is like there's some sort of misdirected energy. It's not being quite focused. There's not a ton of intention behind it, or it's like you're giving too much or you're not giving enough.
Okay.
I think
that lines up well with ageism.
Yeah, you're always like giving too much.
Too much, too little. There's yeah, I mean that it totally lines up with kind of our thought process for coming into this conversation. And yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
There's definitely this like I'm really struggling with the word balance. Like I'm just not, I feel like when we say balance, that's not what that's not what we mean, or the things we associate with balance. Like that's not what we mean when we say we're looking for balance. We could probably do a whole episode on it, but I think that there's sort of this thing in when 6 of Pentacles is reversed, it's like asking you to prioritize and put things together in a way that feels natural to you and that also feels like supportive to you.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's reversed, it's like there's something in this that's really not supportive to you, or that you are not supporting someone the way that they need supporting. You know what I mean?
That's good. We had a conversation about your pumpkin deck, 6 of pumpkins.
Yeah.
Is it the mom handing out the candy to the children?
Yeah, it's a witch. So it's like you can see, and when I've been thinking of reversals lately, I've actually been thinking of them very literally as like the card turned over. So when the card's turned over, it's like the candy isn't going into the bag. It's just falling. You know what I mean? And because I pulled 5 of Cups the other day, and I was imagining all the cups that were full were spilled out because it was reversed. And then it's like the water goes into anything when a cup is reversed. And
go ahead.
Same with this. It's like no candy is getting to anybody that it needs to get to.
Yeah.
because it's just upside down. So it can't go into anything. But I do,
When I
this card is such a beautiful representation of Six of Pentacles, like in its just most literal sense. This
no,
sort
I
of,
totally have been thinking about that card ever since you talked about it.
yeah.
And and so then when you pulled it, I was thinking like, is Six of Pentacles reversed the mom or the lady at the end of the street who like drops a toothbrush in there, or and it's like, I see your intention, but like that's not really the point of this night.
Yeah. Totally.
Right.
Oh. Well,
Okay, I like this.
that's like a great thing for us to kind of come back to throughout this conversation. And maybe that's like a great question for us to have for you is like, what type of support do you need? Because obviously I think the kind of support you need throughout your life changes throughout so many, like as you grow up and as you have kids, the type of support you need is way different than the type of support you need after they're gone. And it's like, you almost need more probably.
Mhm.
But
So
yeah,
let's get into an introduction.
let's get into it. So I wanted to have Kathy on because I feel like we met at a time where I was going through a really big shift in my life. Like I was just having all of these things that felt so chaotic and wild. And I saw her as this just like very inspirational, exciting person who made me feel like growing up was a fun, exciting thing to do. Like I watched you, it was like you were getting divorced, but you were traveling the world and you were taking salsa classes and you were still teaching. And I saw the way that you like put into your students and you were redecorating your house and you were doing all of these things that I just thought like, wow, that's so cool to be able to like make choices from this very informed adult place. And it made me feel like I was excited to get to that point in my life where my choices didn't feel so out of control. But I also wanted to talk to you because we've talked a lot about that. And I don't think I would have brought this up with anybody else, like someone else in your age group, because we haven't talked about it before. But you've talked to me and Joey a lot about feeling nervous to tell people how old you are because you don't want them to see you a certain way. And knowing that once you do tell someone how old you are, they have all of these preconceived notions about how you're going to be or that you can or can't do things. And you talked about how people treated you differently after your hip replacement. And I think that particularly in the industry we're in, we feel like there's this kind of sweet spot where you're too young to do certain things. And then you hit the sweet spot that lasts like 5 years where you're just the perfect age for people to take you seriously. And then right after that, you're like too old to do it. And it's like, if you're within our parents' age, like we have a really hard time listening to people who are our parents' age for some reason and feeling like, we find all of the things we do on social media and we connect with people through social media. And we just wanted to talk to you and kind of like get your perspective on some of the things that you go through and the way that you've been able to, find your whole spiritual journey, because I have found things through you. Like I have found teachers and I've found tarot decks and things that like I wouldn't have found another way. So yeah, that was a lot to say. Here's Kathy. We're going to let her introduce herself. If you want to tell us like, your journey of becoming a teacher and how your life evolved to where it is now.
Wow, it's a really long life. Well, I mean, I started being a teacher because I graduated from college and got a teaching degree. And I would say like the majority of my teaching time, I'm not that impressed with myself. Like I had to learn as I went. And then, and then I had to keep working. And I used to just lament all the time, why am I doing this? Why am I not like, I used to want to live in California and do what you were doing, but had no idea how to do it because I grew up in Wyoming and stuff. So I just kept at it. And throughout, I mean, I guess it was my journey because I just learned so much like each year with my trials and troubles with, trying to maneuver like a government system that involves young minds and lives. And so I was always in a battle. I would say I say definitively every principal I ever had wanted to fire me. because I was a big mouth and I was really rebellious and a lot of times I just wouldn't do stuff. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And so I had to fight the system. And then, but because of it, I got like a really good pension. And so I was able to, in my 50s, retire. And then, but everything for me always happens in a big burst. So I got a divorce. Joy moved like 3 months later. I moved into another house after leaving a house that I'd been in for 22 years and went through the change. So I just like all these things happened and I had a really bad hip and I couldn't hardly walk. And so, that was, and I kept working. I just stopped working 2 years ago, but when I got my hip replaced, that was like a life changer. It had been injured when I was 12. And so I literally had lived with this pain that just kept getting increasingly worse until I was like 56 when I got a new hip. And all of a sudden it's had no pain and now I can dance. I'm dancing samba and African dance and I don't have any pain at all. But I feel like a poser. Like I will sit in groups of people at dance and hear them go, wow, look, she's 48. Isn't she amazing? And they'll be talking about this other woman who's like 11 years younger than me. And they'll be talking to me like, well, look how old she is, and she looks great. I hope I look that great when I get that age. And I'm like, yeah. And I never say well, I'm 59. And it's because they completely freak out. It's not even like they go, oh, okay. They're like, oh my God. And they're like, oh my God. Oh, you look great. You look really great. And I'm like, I know they're trying to be nice, but I know that I have just like crumbled before their eyes. It's like they found out like I was a vampire, like they're in a movie and they looked at a picture and here I am in the picture and they realized that I'm 400 years old. Like that's what it feels like, and it just happens instantly. And then forever after they're looking at me like that person who's old, but they're doing things. Right. And on the one hand, I think they're flattering, but on the other hand, I'm like, I just wish I didn't have a definition.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I always get defined immediately. And when I first got divorced, somebody told me to get on Tinder, which was the biggest mistake. And they have like this age group choice and it ends at 55. Like it's 55 plus. And so like you hit 55 and you're thrown into a vat of everyone that's old, basically. It's like, well, we got these young people. And then if you're 55, you can date a 90-year-old.
Oh
Gonna
my
be in the
God.
same category. And so then I checked it out and there was all these guys in there, like very few guys my age. And so then I went down to like the 37 slot and there were all these guys in their 50s down there pretending they were 37. Like because they didn't want to be in the vat either. But dudes will just do it. They'll be like, I'm not gonna be in this thing. And then go down there. And I was like trying to stay up there for a while. And then I'm like, this is not for someone my age. And then you get the silver singles option, which I don't want either, because then it's like, okay, now I'm going to be like, changing someone's diaper or something. And so I just like online dating is just out. It's just out. It's like and the guys on there are not really looking for somebody their age either.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad that you said that. I mean, first of all, there's so many things that you just broke down that I'm like, oh shit, been there, done that. Like always the immediate reaction is to be like, oh my God, you're 50? You look great. Doesn't she look great? Look how good she looks. Guess how old she is. Like it's so it's really rude. And I mean, I'm not complaining about my age, but even for me, turning 30 this year, every year up until I turn 30, oh my God, how old are you? Oh my God, you're still young. You have time. As soon as I hit 30, oh, you're not in a relationship? Don't you want to get married? What are you doing for your It's like a complete shift. And I'm sure it happens around every decade where like people's opinions change of you, but I never thought like it stops at 55 and then people are like, "Oh, that's done." And that's fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just like all it's like 55 plus. You're just like in the same
Rude.
lump as people who are like 90. That's wild.
Yeah, you get like the senior discount. And it's like, I don't feel like I need a senior discount. Maybe when in my grandparents' era, people died at 65, maybe at 55, they need a deal. right? But I
Yeah.
like we could conceivably live to be 100, you know,
Right.
or more, like, you know, with modern science. And so it's like we're not at the end.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole different era, but people still refer, like they really think back on their grandparents when they think of ages. And like my grandparent, like Aunt B, you know, from Andy Griffith. It's like, oh, you must be Aunt B. And I don't know if you ever watched Andy Griffith because it was old when I was young, but it was like Aunt B was like a spinster who was 50, and she had like gray curly hair and a big baggy dress. And that I think people still think that you're immediately going to revert to Aunt B when you hit a certain age, and you're just getting your stride. You're just not broke. You're just smart, way smarter than you were, and have had a lot of life experiences. And you immediately get thrown into the 55 plus bat.
I mean, I'd love to talk about that. Like, do you have spaces in your life where your life experience is valued and people are turning to you for that wisdom?
Well, I feel like some of it is on me. Like I feel like I my generation feels certain ways and they impart it on each other. Like, or even going to the doctor. You go to the doctor, and it's like, you know, this hurts. Well, you're old, you know, and so it's like they just start like writing you off on everything on age. And I feel the same way. Like some of it I put on me. Like even Joy will say, well, I think most people don't worry about it as much as you're worrying about it. And so I think just the little times that happens, it just like has this huge impact on me. And I start thinking, but then I'll find myself like a bunch of my new friends are in their 30s, you know, because they're also don't have kids and are out dancing and doing the things I'm doing. And I am always shocked that they want to hang out. Like they're like, hey, let's go do this thing. And I'm like, is this like a mercy hangout or that, you know, or did they, and then I find out they actually want to be friends. And so some of it's me too, like I'm not open to it because I'm assuming, you know, that they're looking at me like a mom, or
Right.
like, oh, we better invite Kathy, we don't want to leave her out. And so I'll get this like insecurity that's not even, you know, there are a lot of people that do not see age at all, and they just like who they like, and so they're out there.
Right.
But so I don't know if I answered your question because I was go off on a different path and forget what the question was.
Do you feel like those friends that you're close with who are much younger than you look to you for like your wisdom of having had more life experience than them?
Yeah. Like I think like especially relationship stuff. Like in some of my tarot readings, I had a friend who was in a relationship that the guy just kept bailing on her all the time, want to be together, then want to break up, want to get married, didn't want to get married. She finally broke up with him and went on this big journey. And then he showed up in the country with a ring, and then he started treating her badly again. And so when she came for the tarot reading, I just felt like saying, you need to run, right? But luckily the cards were like if I had gone through the deck and taken out every like get the hell out card that the deck has to offer, that was her reading. And so then I was like, oh, well, you know, I was trying to spin it so I didn't sound too, you know it all. And she finally looks and she goes, could you just tell me? You can be honest with me. And so I read the cards, but then I was able to say, you know, this isn't going to get better. This yes, it's going to be. You guys are in your 20s. This is going to be your happiest times. And then shit gets really hard. And you have babies, and babies are it's like the rubber hits the road. They better be able to show up big time when you have a baby, because that's what she wanted, was a baby.
Right.
And I'm like, this, you know, you need to find somebody that can do that, not somebody that bails every other month. And so she went home and just broke up with him. I couldn't believe it. And she took everything to heart that I said. And I was like, wow, somebody listened to me. Because like, I'm used to people not listening to me, but I guess like lately I was thinking how much people listen to me. And I thought, oh, it must be because I'm older. So, because I've always been very opinionated, and I think the cards help. The cards like are an added guarantee that it's true. Like if you like look at the cards and like, oh, she must be telling the truth. So that's been helpful too. But yeah, I've been giving it seems like lately a lot of relationship advice. The
I
guy,
feel like
and then she had a guy like that wasn't working out, and I'm like, well, you could marry him and be me in 25 years, because I was getting a divorce at the time, and she just like went home and broke with him too. So I think and then she found a really great guy, you know, so it worked out. But I was from the era where you weren't supposed to change spouses. like it was frowned upon and you were told to keep working on it. And
Yeah.
even though it wasn't a good relationship, we both had that. We're both Catholic and we both just kept thinking we had to stick it out. And so I tried like a zillion things. And so I know what it looks like when somebody's like beating their head against the wall with something.
I would actually love to talk to you because you just said you tried a zillion things. And I think that this is like part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because you've introduced me to so many spiritual practices and teachers. And like, I would love to know some of the spiritual things that you have tried throughout your lifetime.
And how have you found them?
Yeah.
Because for us, it's all through social media or some type of digital something. Like definitely 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been tuned into this at all. So I often wonder, like adults who aren't fully in this social media mix, like where are you finding this stuff?
Yeah, I know she'd asked me about that. I was trying to think about books because I had books, Shakti Gawaine's, creative visualization. I had that book, but I always feel like things found me. And so I was very, like all kids really interested in like Ouija boards and things like that. I know I read a book one time about spirits coming and like doing things to people. I was really afraid that they were like going to come in my sleep and do things to me I didn't want them to do. And so I had like all those fears as a kid. But I also think that my house was haunted. And I think I eventually moved in like Joey's house and we had some full on ghosts going on in that house. And I just kept denying it. And so I don't know if I just was super sensitive as a kid and just was wired like that. And then things would just come to me. So stuff would happen. I would find books and read about things. I very early on created my own idea of how religion worked because I was a Catholic and I read The Little Prince and just had this epiphany that, reincarnation was the only way that things were going to work. That going and burning in a fire because you picked up a pencil or and didn't give it to the person it belonged to, or all the weird crap that you learn in Catholic upbringing. Yeah. And I was just like, well, that does seem like a very nice way to handle it. And so I read The Little Prince and I'm like, oh, reincarnation, because I really saw reincarnation like theme in that book for some reason. And so I came up with my own idea of religion. And then I started doing creative visualization and manifestation really early on.
How old were you?
I was probably like 10 or 11.
I feel like you've tried a lot of different types of therapy too, or you've just tried a lot of different. How did you find what is it your therapist does?
Jillian?
EMDR?
Yeah, she did trauma release.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff that like, I don't know that I would have thought to be like, oh, I'm going to find a trauma release therapist. Like,
I read about that in that book we were talking about.
Yeah.
The Body's Not an Apology.
That came to me too. Like I had two separate friends who didn't even know each other tell me to go to the same woman. And then I went to her and then she was like, I want to do this technique on you. And she could see I was traumatized. And then we just layer by layer, it was like an onion, you just peel out. Like usually the most noticeable traumas seem to come out first and they just kind of float away. Like she'll take you into this meditative state. You'll have to breathe into the like the part of your body that you're feeling the tension in. And then she'll be like, you'll start breathing. And then pretty soon for me, it's just like a movie screen. And I will, with my eyes closed, I will just see an image, like a full blown image of a scene that traumatized me. And she'll be like, just breathe into it. Sometimes you cry, sometimes you're terrified, but it's like the feeling got stuck. And like what she says, like your brainstem doesn't have a sense of time, but it's also where panic comes from and where your panic response comes from. And so something traumatized you as a child and you repressed it, your brain really thinks it's still happening. And it's like, even if you're in 59, it's like your brain's like, it's just below the surface. And so if something happens, it could trigger you. Like if something happens that brings that memory up, you'll just like have a really overreact to the situation because all that stuff is still there. And so as I went to her, I was noticeably different. Like I went out, I used to talk 100 miles an hour, like I was going to have an aneurysm. I was so hyper. And And I just completely calmed down because those traumas just started pouring out. And yeah, it was just really powerful for me. I think it was the reason I made all the changes, to be honest. I think when you're in a trauma place, you tend to just want to be safe and you don't want to make any changes and you're just kind of stuck there. And things that can traumatize one person won't traumatize another. My therapist is an energy worker. Her energy would help. She could see what was going on. She could see, like, are you looking at a snake right now? Like, she could see it. So she's pretty gifted. And I've seen people that have had trauma release therapy and it was badly done. And they were at home crying for 4 days and they hadn't really processed it properly. And so if you find a trauma person, they've got to be good at it, because that's some big stuff sometimes that comes up.
But you feel like mostly people, it's just been like word of mouth that like people have recommended someone to you, or you just are like very willing to try a lot of.
No, I'm just always jumping into stuff and trying it. Sometimes it's weird.
Yeah.
Like, I've done some weird stuff.
I think that's cool.
Rebirthing was really big in the 80s, and you just lay there and basically hyperventilate until you're hysterical. And I did that. That wasn't good.
Yeah. What are some of the like weirdest things you've done, or like what are like the weird things, and like what's been kind of popular throughout the ages? Because sometimes I think that certain things are like new and they're like not new.
Right.
People have been doing like chaotic breath work like for years, and just because someone was able to make like a pastel graphic like and put it on Instagram, like suddenly it seems like it's a new thing to me. But
Right.
It's called breath work instead of rebirthing.
yeah.
But rebirthing was raw. Like, I think breath work is way better. And any old person could become a rebirther.
A rebirther.
Yeah, like it was like they went to training, and this hippie lady came over to my house and did a rebirthing on me, and I was just like this hysterical mess.
I feel like I totally did a rebirthing last week.
Yeah.
And I was talking about that chakra breath work, and when I was like, I am changed, that was a rebirth.
Yeah.
I didn't reborn. I wasn't reborn. I was just like all like shaky and traumatized. Like, what happened? So I think again, it was like she just wasn't good. And anybody can become a therapist. And a lot of times people that are the most fucked up decide to go into therapy. And so you have to be so careful about who you choose, because I know people in my life that became therapists and they were the most messed up people I've ever met. And like had terrible relationships or never had relationships, but they were relationship coaches. And so like, you won't know, like I know a woman just recently, she became a therapist and she's like the most narcissistic person I've ever met. And I was just astonished at how little, like what a thoughtless human being she was. And she like quit teaching and went off and became a coach, like a life coach. And I was like, her? So
I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that's like definitely a problem that I see in the industry. It's like, are you here to help people, or are you here to prove that you can help people? Like, what's the motivation?
I think that's one of the most common coaching stories is like, I did did this. So now I'm going to teach you the process of how I did it. Like, I get so many, like, I've signed up for a lot of newsletters, which like, yeah, on me, but I get so many of them that are like, I just made $10,000 and now I'm going to teach you how to do it. Or like, I overcame this situation. Now I'm going to teach you how to overcome it. And I'm like, part of me is just kind of like, I think I'm just good to like figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's so damaging. I had one coach. This is on me for working with this coach. I was at a time when like I wanted results, like, and that was the energy that I took into that exchange. And I totally recognize my fault there. But at one point she told me, this is when the coaching relationship really broke for me. She was like, people pay for speed. And I was like, okay, nope. I cannot sell an acceleration of life experience to anyone, and to lie and say that that's what I'm here to do as a coach, like, can't do it. And I know that's totally her marketing tactic. I went through this. I started having 100K months. So I'm going to teach you how to do it in 6 weeks so that you don't have to go through the 7 years of pain that I went through. You can't teach someone 7 years of life in 6 weeks. It just can't happen. Like, you can give them some tools. You can give them 6 weeks worth of tools and say, hey, you can go work on this for as long as it takes, but putting time limits on stuff, dangerous. I mean, and that's what we do in ageism. We're
Yeah.
like, here's the time limit of life well lived. And then once you get 55 plus, like, you probably won't learn anything else.
Yeah.
What is that? And I think it's so important for us to really examine the way time is manipulated in industries that we're involved in relationships that we have. Time for me is probably my biggest fear. I often have like a crushing realization when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm running out of time. And it's so stupid because it's like, no, I'm not. There's a lot of time for me to fuck up a lot of things and get a lot of things right. Like, why is it in my head that I'm running out of time? And it goes back to what Kathy was saying, just this societal pressure that we put on ourselves, that we put on other people, and then it all gets handed around like there are time limits to things. There are things that are done by this time, and there are ages you can't say you are. Like it's just a whole range of like conversations we're unwilling to have because we've just associated it with fear, with pressure, with expectation. It's a whole mess.
Yeah.
I watched this series called Younger.
Oh yeah.
And the part that the favorite line from that whole thing, because the whole thing was, oh, she was 40, but she had to pretend she was 28, and she was like a poser at 28. And I thought it was funny because you looked so amazing at 40. Like it's probably the best decade of a woman's life. But and you could easily be mistaken for 28. But and in fact, the second season, the producer said, we realized how silly it was that we thought it would be such a shock that a 40-year-old could be 28. And he goes, of course she's gonna look great. Like they actually learned something from their series too. But in the series, people are like finding out that she's 40 and she's in this really young industry. And this girl's like, how old are you? How old are you? And she goes, I'm age queer. And I thought that was so great because it's like, don't ask me that. Like, what does it even mean? Like, I'm doing it, right? Why do you have to also put an age on it?
Oh my God, yes. Age queer. I'm ready to be age queer.
No, I used it one time, and then somebody was all baffled, and they didn't know if it had to do with gender. It's like, no, queer just means like, you don't get to know, like it is not, like I don't really know how you would describe it. It's like I'm just not letting you know how old I am.
Right.
This is what I'm doing. I
And
met
that's
a guy one time and he was kind of flirting with me, and he was like in his 30s, and I'm like, look, I'm way older than you. And he goes, I know what I'm looking at. Okay. I know what I'm looking at. And that's all I care. That was all he cared about. And I was so surprised. I was like, but so some people are like that, and other people, and my generation is the worst. They will say, oh, well, I'm not getting any younger, and they'll like completely limit themselves. And then I think that like can also affect how other people view my age group. So it isn't just young people are all wrong. Like I have friends that didn't learn to text, like they don't even know how to text. And it's like, this isn't going away, right? You have to learn how to do this, and or they, just give up on their wardrobe. Oh, nobody looks at me anyway. And it's like you're still alive, and there's still a lot of things that you could be doing right now. And it's like a battle, really, to get them to see themselves like that.
right.
For sure. Do you feel like you're in a place where you're still like too young or too old for certain things?
I have to battle it. I have to battle. I never feel like I'm too young for anything anymore. But I do, like I have to question sometimes when I'm doing stuff. It's like, what are you thinking? Like I was in I went to a dance group, and it was a Latin dance, and I found myself on stage in fishnets and high heels, strutting around and mugging and doing like really sexy dances with a bunch of like 30-year-olds. And I was like, the whole time I'm like, I am an imposter. Like I felt like an imposter. And I had like so much makeup on, I felt like I was in a costume.
Yeah.
And people really had no idea. But in my head, I was like, oh my God, I'm 58 years old. What am I doing up here? And it's like 400 people watching us and our, wiggle around in our little swimsuits with our fishnets and stuff. And it was like, I can never let it go. Like I was spreading out on the stage. It's like, oh my God, what are you fucking thinking? You know, but I'm like, but I want to do it. Like that's always the bottom line is, but I wanted to do this.
Oh, I had a question because you just started doing this and I've never done this. It's like a wellness thing. You started working with like a sexuality coach, right?
Oh yeah.
She got a jade egg.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have tons of friends who have those.
Like how did you find that? Like how did you get into that? Or like how did you decide like, oh yeah, I want to try this?
Well, I listened to one of your people's podcasts. Is it Sahara Rose?
Oh, Sahara Rose.
Yeah. And she talked about it. I'm like, what? And so because I think that's another thing that my generation, it was almost like our vaginas were pixelated. We weren't supposed to think about them, talk about them, or anything. And like in my 40s, I decided I was just going to get a Brazilian because Jennifer Love Hewitt talked about bedazzling her vagina and how she thought women needed to like love their vaginas. Like, really? And then I saw Sex in the City too. I was like, I'm just going to go like embrace this. I'm going to embrace part of my body that has just been completely ignored. And so I started getting, Brazilians, and then it's just like been an incorporation, like trying to incorporate. And I also I read The Blue Zone, which is, they talk about why people live well. Not just
I love that book.
Well. And sex was huge. It was a huge factor in every single situation. That if people were over 100, they were, and healthy, that they still had an active sex life, and that they said multiple partners throughout their lives, and sex was like a common thing. And so I'm like, well, I want to, keep the juices flowing in my life and keep my energy flowing. And that's a huge part of it. Right. And I didn't realize, like she explained, how each segment of your vagina has all of the pressure points for all the organs in your body. So it's another like acupuncture area or acupressure area that will each inch goes like different organs in your body. So it isn't just getting off. It's like it's like revitalizing your whole body.
Amazing.
So I'm only just beginning it, but it's again, it came to me like I heard it, I was thinking about it, and then my friend who's from Colombia has another friend that I just met, and she's a jade egg person, and so we were had dinner together, and she's like, oh, I'm a coach, I do jade eggs, and I'm like, okay, well, this is it, we're gonna just do this thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
The one thing that you brought up that I did want to bring up, because I just think it's so interesting, and I think it might be a nice way to wrap up this part of the conversation, is just when you were talking about being age queer, and then we're talking about sexuality, and I'm thinking about all the ways that we talk about accessibility, especially the conversation now when we are just trying to be PC, accepting, open doors, and there's sexuality and the fluidity around gender, and there's racial inequality that we're discussing, and we never discuss age.
Yeah.
It's like the one thing that we just choose not to focus on. We're just like, that's not part of the accessibility conversation. And I think I'm so happy that we had this conversation, because that's why we have this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just a part of the conversation that people our age, we think it's not for us or something. We think it's not part of our wellness, even though we are going to age. It was like what we were talking about before, where you're almost like we just don't even want to think about it. So then we're really discounting people who are our parents' age. And it's we could have these conversations with our parents all the time about because they have knowledge and wisdom and years on us, but it's for some reason we would never ask them about what are you doing to keep your sex organs going. I know that feels probably weird to ask about, and people are probably cringing that I'm just doing this with my boyfriend's mom. But
I'm like, oh no, Joey's gonna hear the
she's like, I'm loving it.
Yeah, but I think it's totally our relationship has reframed entirely the way that I thought about that age group of people in their 50s to 60s, because I had really just been it's not part of my world, it's not part of my life. It's really an age group that I totally put on the back burner as sort of irrelevant, which is terrible. of me to do
I
that,
mean,
like a wellness practitioner.
right? I think about it a lot like just there's a trauma for all of us that kind of especially women, that really hinges on that going from preteen to teen.
Yeah.
And you suddenly think, my mom doesn't understand me. She doesn't know anything about me. Parents just don't understand, period. And it's so traumatic for us that, just like you were saying, Kathy, it sticks with us. And so now it's like parents just don't understand. Parents just don't understand. But by the time that we get to 30, they definitely understand. Like they might not have remembered what it was like to be 12, or maybe they did. We just felt misunderstood because we were 13 and life was fucking hard and puberty. That's like all it is. But like I still sometimes think there's something in my head that's like, she doesn't understand. Parents don't understand. This generation doesn't understand. And it's because of that trauma. And I'm like, okay, so while I'm doing all this inner work to release myself from racism, release myself from ableism, to release all these things, ageism like has to be part of that conversation. And I have to get to a point where I'm like not writing off the older generation. And there's a lot of me, like, there's a lot in me that writes off the older generation because I'm writing off old white men in Congress,
Well,
and that's a thing.
Well, the thing is, it is a tough one because I write people off. Like I will, because I'm like, oh, these guys are just, they haven't changed since the 80s, And
Right.
so I think you have to find examples of people that keep moving and keep growing. And some people literally just stop growing. And then they're the ones that we look at and go, oh my God. I have the same problem with dating. People are like, who are you dating? I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to date these old white guys in Congress type guys that
Right.
are still using the same language and vocabulary that they used when they were 25 years old. Like they didn't grow. And so
Right.
whenever I'm trying to manifest somebody come into my life, I'm like, well, I want somebody my age, but they have to be young at heart and they have to still be growing. And that's a rare thing to find, and they get more and more rare, like little rare gems as you age.
Right.
I mean, even now, like you guys probably know people that are really immature and they just haven't progressed in their lives, and they just keep dropping. Like the older you get, the more they drop out, and there's like a few outliers left. Like there's people. I have a neighbor down the street. She's 79. She's been an artist her whole life. She is as funny as can be. She's the most creative person. She's constantly creating new things. So she's my example now. It's like
Mhm.
that's when I'm 79, I'm going to be like her. So I just had to find those people and just try to aspire to that, because you are always going to get older.
yeah.
Mhm.
And
I think you hit on something really important that like I think it's like when we get to the point that we want to like sort of disconnect from that, like, and really discount a person who's a certain age, like if we could instead talk to them about growth and growing,
Mhm.
like maybe we could keep that bridge for longer.
Mhm.
Like if at that point, or like it makes me think about as I enter a phase of life where I become a parent, like I want to keep reminding myself that like when my kid is 12, I want to really let them know like I'm still growing,
Mhm.
you
Yes.
know? And I think that like I'm so glad we had this conversation, and
Me
it's like
too.
encouraging me to go have a conversation with my parents about growth, or with, when I have a conversation with someone who's older, instead of just me instantly thinking like their mind is made up, it can't be changed, which is sometimes true. And like that can be its own trauma, trying to deal with a person who is just completely obstinate and
Mhm.
refuses to grow. But it's also really encouraging to think that like if we could frame things in a way that we're talking about continued growth, like I think there's a lot of room for us to like not discount anyone.
Right. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
and I think I could go either way. I sometimes can look at somebody younger and be like, okay, what are they gonna say now? Like they're
Yeah.
too young to understand this, right? And then I'll be like, oh gosh, she's really bright and interesting. So I can be the same way. I think you can just like be in a decade and have assumptions about, because of it could be that way with racism too, just overall assumptions on site.
Yeah, I like ending on this note of just remembering that we're all continuing to grow and not writing off any specific moment below or under, because we're all just collectively growing. And I'm so glad we had you on this episode as an example of someone who is just actively growing. you know, and that's been, I mean, it's been a beautiful conversation for me, and it inspires me to definitely make some shifts in the way I view time, in the way I view age, all of these things that definitely were brought up for me in this conversation. And I'm like, I have to think about that. Like I said in the beginning of the conversation, I'm in a period of a lot of contemplation. And that's like, these are the type of things where I'm like, oh no, I need to go think about this for at least 4 hours. Like I'm like giving myself time limits because time is such a thing. And I'm like, can it not be? But
But
we'll
I
see.
always think I'm the only one that's worried about time. And I'm like, well, who am I kidding? Everybody I know is like, well, now I'm 30, it's baby time. And I haven't
Right.
met the man of my dreams who wants to make babies with me. And so they're really stressed out. And then they get to another point where they're raising their kids and have any time for themselves. You know, and then you finally get your kids raised, and then all of a sudden you got this like you're out on your own and your body starts doing funky stuff. And you know, it's like, you know, like, and don't even get me started on hormone replacement, because I think that's like a huge factor with my age group that really puts them behind the 8 ball if they are told never to do it. And they're walking around getting night sweats and not sleeping. And so it's like there's just every decade there's a
Right.
challenge.
It never ends.
Until it does.
Yeah.
Right.
So just get over thinking you're going to get to the finish line, because there's no finish line. It's like,
Right. I mean, that's the wisdom right there.
Yeah. There's only the ultimate finish line, which is the end of your life.
which you really
So,
don't want.
right.
And
That
then-
is, it's like it's like we always want to get to the end. We always want to get to the next step, but then we're like, oh my God, actually, like I do not want that at all.
And then you're like, you hoping that there's some kind of reincarnations you could get a redo.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there better be. I'm thinking lots of reincarnation. I'm like, I missed the mark on that lesson. I'll do it in the next life.
Totally. Oh.
Okay, I loved this.
Yeah, same. Yeah, do you have any like any final thought you'd like to share with listeners? Any like, life lessons, or you just want to let them go?
No, I think I've imparted like all the life lessons that I know.
I think the last tidbit she just gave, whenever it was like, there is no finish line.
I was the worst. I was the worst, is just like barreling through life and regretting that I wasn't doing things the right way and thinking I screwed everything up. And even when I got divorced, it's like, oh man, I just screwed like the last 30 years of my life. I just totally screwed them up. And it's finally like, well, no, I didn't, because I learned all these things and I had all these experiences, and I have Joey, and you know, like I have wonderful things that came out of it. And now that I'm writing in this writing class and I write about all those crazy things, like people freaking love it, and they're like, wow, you really had a really unique life. And I'm like, yeah, it wasn't really by choice, but I guess it's working out now, right? So
Right.
Amazing.
Okay, everybody out there, talk to your parents, talk to people in your life who are an age group up from you. There's wisdom to be gained. There's wisdom to be gained from children, you know? So we're even in a place where I'm writing off 15-year-olds left and right. And like, I know they have some wisdom to impart on me. So just opening up the doors, saying no to ageism, making that part of your platform of accessibility for all, wellness for the people. This is what we do. This is why we're here.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so now we're gonna do our favorite part. No, what's the vibe?
Taylor's.
What's the vibe is actually my favorite part, I think. But we're gonna ask you our money questions. Full disclosure. Okay, so our first question is, how much money do you make?
well, in my retirement, I got like public retirement, which you think would be a lot of money, but I have to supplement it.
Yeah.
And so I was subbing and tutoring. With the pandemic, I ended up doing a pod. At this point in my life, I'm trying to learn how to make my own money. I worked for the government my whole life, and I knew exactly what my paycheck was going to be every month for my whole life. And so I'm now in this world where I need clients and I need to get paid, and I need to, you know, like have my own business.
Yeah.
So I still need like more money. So I'm doing, and plus I don't want to just sit around.
Yeah.
So
Side note, I forget all the time that like if you're a public school teacher, you work for the government.
Yeah.
Like I always forget that, and I don't know why, because it is like that's definitely what it is.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
aunt
the
also
government
was a teacher
operates.
her whole life.
Yeah.
Who was?
My aunt,
Oh,
my dad's sister.
Mm.
I mean, the pension was good. She travels, she lives well, but I mean, that's out for the rest of. I mean, I worry about this generation of
Yeah, like teachers.
teachers, and
yeah. I think I'm a rare leftover who gets a pension. I really
yeah, could be
did.
the last
Yeah.
of them in that, just right in this sweet spot. My aunt retired maybe, I think it's 5 years ago now, but I wonder like how many pensions are left? How will Social Security stand? Or
Yeah.
do we need a revolution?
We need
We need
something
a
because you're not gonna. I mean, Social Security came about because like I think it was like in the 50s or something because old people were starving, and so they had to do something. And so I'm sure they have to do something. They can't just let people like die once they leave their old job or something. But
right.
I don't know what it's gonna look like.
Yeah.
So the next question, this could be for your business or this could be for the pods that you were doing, but what are your prices and how did you decide on them?
Well, like for the pod, I just a friend wanted to put the pod together and I had been charging $50 an hour to tutor and she just because she was giving me like 12 hours a week, I just kept it at 50. And I'm like, if I had like 5 little kids, and I said if it goes up to 6 kids, then we'll just $10 more per kid. So for a short while, I was getting 60 an hour, which is phenomenal because subbing, you go out to the public schools, you sub for 7 hours, and they give you $100
For the day.
for the day.
Oh my
And
God.
unless you work at a high needs like Title I school, and then it's 125. And you're in there with like 30 kids learning someone's curriculum. You have all these responsibilities. It's pretty intense. I can do it, but it's an intense thing. And this is like I get to do what I want to do. I know what the kids need. I can be creative, and then I get 50 an hour. And
Wow.
but my neighbor across the street was charging 100 an hour
Wow.
and getting it. And I felt like that was too much. Like I'm like, this is taking advantage of the fact that the schools are closed because of a pandemic. And I just didn't want to try that. So
Yeah. That's nice of you.
yeah. I just thought I that's what I thought it was worth to go in for 4 hours and make $200. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was a decent amount. And the parents were all paying like $10 an hour each.
Right.
And so I felt like that was fair because they're all in a bad spot. Everybody's in a
Right.
bad spot, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Our next question is, what are your spending habits and what's your biggest expense?
Well, the biggest expense is always your house. And it isn't just the mortgage, it's also your house is always breaking. And you don't ever anticipate that. And so that's the thing that's always coming up for me. Yeah, just regular bills. I gave up when I got divorced. My whole income was cut in half, but my expenses were the same. Like moving into a new house, the mortgage was the same here as it was when we were sharing a mortgage. And so I had to like really scale back when I got divorced and I was still working. And so like I don't know how, but you just do it and you just readjust. And then when I retired, I had to adjust down like another 1,500 a month less and then it's like, okay, do you want to be really careful or do you just want to make more money? And that's like my friends even said that you have to decide if you just want to live really sparse or you want to make more money. And so I got to a certain point. And the pandemic really helped because I was still spending more money than I made, using my savings and wondering what the heck was going to happen. And then when the pandemic hit, I couldn't believe how little I spent. And I like saved thousands of dollars during the pandemic. And I'm like, what are you buying? Like I
Right.
didn't even understand what I had bought that was $1,000 worth of stuff. And so I got my budget under control, but I also realized I don't want to budget anymore. Like I'm figure out other ways for money to come in. And I also think it's a mistake to stop working and being purposeful if you retire. I think that people die then. I think that their body's like, oh, you're done. Like your vagina, the same thing. Like, oh, we don't need you anymore. And I feel
Right.
the same with earning and working. I think it gives your body a purpose and it gives your brain a purpose. And you have to have a purpose or you're going to die.
Yeah.
That's one of my driving forces. But money is like the indicator of that.
Mm,
It's like the energy coming in.
yeah.
Right.
And our last question is, what is your favorite thing you've spent money on recently?
I would probably say my dance class that I'm taking right now, like my it's like a company, and it's samba, and she's very resourceful, and she has us out in a park, and so it was one of the first activities I did after the lockdown. Was we were all like social distance out in this park in the middle of Denver, doing Afro-Cuban and samba, and then we were sitting out on blankets drinking wine, in the park, and it was like I just felt so free, and I also just am getting in great shape, and it's just a great group of people. So
I love that full wellness vibe
Yeah,
right there.
totally. Love that. Okay, now it's time for my favorite part of the episode.
What's the vibe? We're
What's
here.
the vibe? We made it all the way to what's the vibe. Do you have a vibe this week, Jay? What's your vibe?
I think I'm going to throw out my book because
Okay.
I like the way that it ties into the conversation we're having. I'm reading, I need to see the author. I'm reading this book called Oona Out of Order. It's by Margarita Montimor, and it's so cute. It's like a lighthearted read, but it's about this girl where she's born on New Year's Day. And on her 19th birthday, she goes to sleep and wakes up and she's 55. And for the rest of her life, she lives her life completely out of order. So every single night that she goes to sleep on New Year's Eve, or even if she doesn't go to sleep, every single night the clock turns 12 o'clock, she jumps to a different year in her life. I'm only about 1/4 of the way in, but it totally, and I started reading it yesterday. So it totally informed the way that we had this conversation, just because people's conception of her changed when she was 50 versus when she was 27 versus when she was 19. Her conception of herself changed, like all of these things, but also with the changing of technology and her trying to like catch up and learn how to use an iPhone only to jump back to 92 and there's nothing of that. And like just kind of seeing the experience chopped up and seeing how weird it is to put the life of a 19-year-old up against the life of a 50-year-old and being in those mindsets. It just totally is a cool exploration, and the writing is cute. It's not prolific, but like it's just a really cute book. So I'm glad I picked it up, and I'm glad that I'm having this conversation in the midst of reading this book.
Yeah, that sounds great. I definitely want to read it.
I do too.
It's cute.
Fun. Okay, what's your vibe?
I don't know. I don't understand what that means.
It's just like,
Love
what
it.
have you, like, what have you been into? Like, what have you been watching or listening to or reading? Or like, have you had any synchronicities of something that's just like, it's very in your field this week?
I mean, you guys have been in my field. So I think that like having people living in my house again has been really like grounding. I can tend to get really crazy in my head when I'm by myself. And so having them here and cooking and drinking coffee and playing games has been like completely like restorative for me. And so I think that's probably where I'm at right now. I just feel like when I have Joey around me too, I just feel like I remember who I am, because I'm honestly kind of always figuring things out every day. And then when he comes here, it's like, oh yeah, Joey's mom. And he has a view of me that is from his eyes. And I'm like, oh yeah, he thinks I'm this. He's
Oh,
really fragile too. Like he always thinks I'm gonna hurt myself or do something stupid. So he's always like reminding me, this is hot, mom. This is really hot. But that's my vibe, is just like family and feeling, and Taylor too, like Taylor's my family too. And so I just love it. I'm like, wouldn't you just like to have a whole house full of people all the time? Because as much as I like having my own life, I really am like a community type person.
you can come live on a commune with me, Kathy. That's my next goal. I'm like, like little individual houses that are like small, but like mostly everything's community. That's my next step whenever it may come. Who knows? Who knows when? What's your vibe, Taylor?
My vibe, I think it's angels. Like angels have been a really big synchronicity for me this week. I feel like I have always felt the presence, not always, since I started getting into a more regular spiritual practice. I've always felt angels around me more so than I felt like a guide or an ancestor. Angels have always been something that I've felt the presence of quickly and easily. And growing up Catholic, like angels, it just felt familiar to me. And this week I had a tarot client that was like very specifically interested in working with her angels. And I felt like I could just hear them so clearly. And as we've been, kind of going around Boulder, and Boulder has some like spiritual bookstores and things, the things that have been catching my eye are like angel cards and oracle decks. And yeah, I'm feeling definitely called to learn more about angels and to really be in communication with them. And I think we're going to have a guest on that's definitely part of her work, is talking to angels. So I feel like it's been in my field. And I'm excited to see kind of like how that will look.
I'm excited for next week's conversation too.
For sure.
Good prelude.
Yeah. So that's my vibe. And I guess that's all. Do you want anybody to like find you or contact you or reach out to you?
For your tarot?
Yeah, this is usually where we say, like, if you want to connect with Kathy.
Well, I'm on Instagram, but I'm not very exciting on there. But if somebody wants to talk to me, and I mean, I'm always full of advice. So they want to.
Yes.
I also do
please share.
tarot readings. And
Yeah.
so if they want to Zoom tarot readings with me, that I'm trying to get that going.
Kathy M. Briggs. Is that your Instagram?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I don't know, actually.
I'm pretty sure.
Kathy M. Briggs.
I think it's Kathy M. Briggs. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to connect with Kathy, you can find her on Instagram at Kathy M. Briggs. I think she's private, but
She is. I just followed you. She was
yeah.
following.
Yeah.
So she's private, which is like honestly cool, but you can request to follow her, send her a message.
See, this is something I don't understand. Like, I didn't know I was private. So I'll have to work on that after this podcast.
This is exciting. We can help you on your path towards, and hopefully some of, the content that we have on Vibes Revealed will help a lot of people who are trying to start their spiritual businesses. There's some stuff. Yeah, like there are things that not everybody knows. If you want to open up your Instagram account and make it not private, then people don't have to request to be able to see your content. So then if you wanted to post, pricings for your readings, or post that, I'm doing readings, the schedule's up online, like you could do it through Instagram if you wanted. But also not everyone chooses to run their business through Instagram. And I'm personally trying to divest my business from my Instagram presence. So
For sure. But
every method is valid.
sure, however you want to do it. But if you want to connect with Kathy, that's the place. Just send her a DM or request to follow. And yeah, if anyone, let us know how this was for you. If you're having any great conversations with a certain age group in your life that maybe you weren't before, or if you want to open up your circle to varying ages, let us know.
Also, next week we're talking about angels, spirit guides, ancestors, which totally ties into, talking about our elders. But if you have any questions about that, if you have any things that you want to talk to us about or for us to bring up on the show, let us know.
Yeah.
And leave us a 5-star review.
Leave us a 5-star review. We will send you, if you let us know you left us a 5-star review, and we'll send you a remedy revealed with, information on how to incorporate the energy of 6 of Pentacles into your life. And that's
so
all.
thanks for tuning in.
Thanks
this was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Kathy.
Thank you for
Thanks.
being
That
on
was
with
so
us.
flattering. It was fun because I listen to you guys every week, and I'm like, she's like, "Do you want to be on our podcast?" And I thought it was just like a little like sound bite. And I'm like, "What? I like me? I'm just the whole time." I'm just
Surprise! Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
Surprise, you're the guest. You're the guest of honor. And
Yeah.
it was such a good conversation.
It was great.
It was.
Thank you. All right. Well, I guess until next time. Oh, I'm going to say this because I forget to say it sometimes at the end of episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Vibes Revealed, on Twitter at Vibes Revealed. You can always send us an email, vibesrevealedpodcast@gmail.com. If you need anything, let us know.
Beautiful.
All right. We will see you next week. Love you.
Bye.
Bye.